Adrian. Thank you so much for being here. So this is talking about proclaiming Colorado's Black history. So I know some of y'all are wondering, are Black people in Colorado? Yes, there are. I often joke with audiences that Colorado is very diverse. We have a lot of different kinds of white people. But we have a rich Black history. So I am Adrian Miller. I'm known as the Soul Food Scholar. My tagline is dropping knowledge like hot biscuits. And so we will certainly do that today and tell you about this wonderful exhibit. So I'm one of the co-curators. So what I'm going to do is just give you an introduction about the exhibit, kind of the overview of it, and then we'll get into more programmatic things as we go along. There will be time for questions at the end, so please have your questions formulated and we'll get going. All right, so this is a picture that was taken at Cherry Creek Drive in Denver circa 1900. So these are some African-American cyclists out for the day, dressed to the nines. And I think this is a great image to capture some of the rich history that we have. So, oh, there we go. Well, it's not showing up there.
Square practiced.
There we go. Okay, so this is one. Okay. All right, so this exhibit is actually a 2-year exhibit. Our launch is going to be September 29th, and it will be at the Museum of Boulder. And this exhibit is an overview of Colorado history, so it's not just African-American history in Boulder, but it will be an overview of Colorado history. But of course, it will have an emphasis on Boulder because that's the institutional home of this exhibit. So we will try to tell that story, and as you can imagine, we have a lot of great stories that we can tell, and so we are seeking to thread the needle to cover a variety of perspectives and experiences. So one thing that was really important was to get the community involved in this organization, in this exhibit, so they felt like they had an investment in it. And so we sought a lot of community partners, some of them represented here on this panel. The other thing is that we decided to create an advisory council. So we got a nice cross-section of Colorado and people also outside of the state who had expertise in creating exhibits like this to help us think through the issues, to make sure that we're covering our bases and that we're putting together a great exhibit. So that was very, very important. And then also, we decided to do a community survey. So we created a list of questions and we asked things like, what would you like to see in this exhibit? And then we actually proactively asked them, hey, out of these subjects, which ones do you think are more important? What kind of stories do you think should be told? Because we wanted, again, to get that community investment in this exhibit. So from that survey, these are the major themes that emerged that people thought were most interesting. So one is, how did African Americans build community in this place called Colorado, when they're coming to Colorado from different perspectives and aspects, right? Some came as enslaved people. People don't know that, but we had quite a few enslaved people in Colorado. Not thousands, but we had a significant amount, and there's testimony of that. Also, we had a number of all-Black communities in Colorado. Deerfield is the most famous example in the 1920s, but throughout the state, we had Black colonies. So we'll talk about how people got here and how they got connected and built community. The second one is the arts. Also, business and entrepreneurship. We had great examples of entrepreneurs here in Colorado, men and women. One example is an formerly enslaved woman named Clara Brown, often called Aunt Clara Brown. But she was somebody who came as a laundress and became quite the philanthropist in Denver and Central City. Also a guy named Barney Ford, who made fortunes and lost them and regained fortunes in Colorado. Education. Colorado has a mixed record when it comes to segregated schools and other things, but early in our city's history, at least in terms of Denver, there was an effort to create segregated schools, and that effort failed. And so we got segregated schools later, and so we'll talk about that. Also, faith community. How do people bring their spiritual practice? And it was very important to us not to just focus on Christianity. There's a wide variety of faiths represented that are represented in the exhibit. Social justice. Just another snippet of Colorado history. In 1895, Colorado had one Black legislator, and a few months after Plessy v. Ferguson was the Supreme Court decision, he actually got passed through Colorado the same legal framework as the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So we had that on the books in Colorado in 1895. So we tell some of that story and bring it up to the future day, to the present day. And then one thing that I'm just really excited about is this concept of Afrofuturism. And one question we're thinking about asking as people leave the exhibit is, how are you going to be a great ancestor to future Black Coloradans? And so we want to explore those concepts. So that is a rough overview of that. And next we have Katrina Miller, no relation, but she's very cool. And she's going to talk about a project that she has brought to life that's pretty incredible. So thank you.
Good morning, afternoon, everybody. My name is Katrina Miller. I am a documentarian, video producer, and filmmaker. And I have worked with the Museum of Boulder on their exhibit videos as a contractor for the past 15 years or so. The Museum of Boulder, outside of their exhibits, has always known that I've had interest in highlighting communities of color, and that I've also wanted to raise awareness to issues in equity. I'm happy to say that we plan to use a lot of the content that I've created over the years, as well as adding new stories that focus on Black joy and excellence. Now, a year ago, my company, Black Cat Video Productions, produced a documentary with Landlocked Films. It is called This Is Not Who We Are. It is currently on our local PBS station, and in the beginning of June, it's going to hit nationally, so look for that. But to tell you a little bit about the film, it takes place in Boulder, and it takes a look at Boulder, Colorado's reputation as a progressive and liberal town, and compares that to the lived experiences of African American residents. And what we find is that Boulder has a lot of the same problems as a lot of other places as far as racial equity and systemic problems and unhoused, and we really just explore all of that. And what I've come to find out, not only was the Museum of Boulder very supportive in many ways in the production of this documentary, but within the production, the film makings inspired them as well. And I'd love to show you a bit of the trailer so you can get a look at some of what will be in the exhibit.
I had a draw to Boulder. I came to Narobi University to begin my life. Did one semester, and 2019 came, and that was when everything had happened with Boulder police.
I couldn't help but notice you're sitting on the patio behind this building.
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind. I had a draw to Boulder. I came to Narobi University to begin my life. Did one semester, and 2019 came, and that was when everything had happened with Boulder police.
I couldn't help but notice you're sitting on the patio behind this building.
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind, I was like, this man is profiling me.
Then you're probably gonna get tased in a second. Because you haven't went to put that down.
A video of a man and Boulder police getting into a confrontation took the internet by storm this week. Sunday, Boulder residents took to the streets to speak up for diversity and demand more police oversight.
I'm a business owner, I own property, I did everything you asked of me, and you gave me nothing. Because you shoved it under the rug, racism doesn't matter, and it's horrible.
It goes back to our founding. Boulder was established with building lots costing $1,000 to make it an exclusive place.
African Americans did live throughout the community, usually in the little rectangle neighborhood, because it was the cheapest land in town. Those folks were living on the railroad tracks. Not a very pleasant place to live, especially when it flooded. Colorado had a Klan governor for 2 years. It was due to the large Klan turnout in Boulder and Laramie counties that he was elected. There were cross burnings on Flagstaff Mountain as late as the 1940s.
There's been a long history of dehumanization. And that dehumanization hasn't simply taken place in Mississippi or Alabama or Texas, but also here. It just may look different than it does in the South.
The happiest place in America is Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder, Colorado. And it has nothing to do with weed. Nothing.
That is the most annoying thing about Boulder, is that Boulder thinks it's better than everywhere else on Earth.
People like it here. It's not like people are like, wow, it really sucks how important it is, because they don't think about that. They're comfortable, and everyone else looks like that, and everyone else perceives the world the way they do. Almost every friend that I've had growing up here, I've had to tell them specifically they can't say the N-word, they can't say certain things. It's just like a constant, steady flow of light breaks through.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Put it down.
If you're holding a gun,
Sir, put it down.
if you're holding a gun, how do you feel? How do you feel, officer?
It's not like I'm just gonna be like, oh, now I'm gonna leave because you think I don't belong here. I'm here. I feel like that's how racism has always been overcome.
This entire world has changed. Like, there is no going back. The capacity is here. We can still.
All right, what we're going to do now is we're just going to have our panelists further introduce themselves. So Minister Glenda, if you would take a moment and introduce yourself.
Good morning. So delighted to see all of you here. My name is Minister Glenda Strong Robinson. I am an associate minister at the historic Second Baptist Church, Boulder. We're 115 years old. I'm the second woman to be ordained or to be a minister there. It's taken a minute for the message to get from God to the other people. I'm also the historian there. I don't know if I said that. And I'm also the historian for the NAACP Boulder County branch. My involvement, excitedly, is that I am the oral history liaison between the Boulder Museum of Boulder, as well as the Maria Rogers Oral History Library under the city of Boulder. And so I'm delighted to be here, delighted that you're here.
Hello everyone, my name is Nyasha James Davis, and I'm the Creative Director of Programming at the Museum of Boulder. I'm helping with the different programming. I'm also a proud member of the NAACP, Boulder County, and I'm helping with oral histories as well.
Hello everyone, my name is Aubrey Reed. I am the instructional designer for this wonderful project, and I have been selected to design the curriculum for K through 12 for this program, and then also to meet with the teachers and the educators, and also the students to bring them into the fold so that they can have their voices heard and be a part of this project.
And I'm Emily Zinn. I'm the project manager for Proclaiming Colorado's Black History, and I was the lead grant writer. My team really loves it when I say I was the grant writer, but it's not very accurate. It was a really collaborative process.
All right, so what we're going to do is I have some questions for each of our panelists, and then we will have them answer, and then we will turn it to audience questions. All right, so let me start with you, Aubrey. Pass the mic down to her. So my question, since you are working on the K-12 curriculum, the question is, do you believe the children are our future, that we should teach them well and let them away?
Absolutely.
All right. So talk to us about your engagement with Boulder Valley School District and how that went and lessons learned there.
Sure. So honestly, I found everyone to be very receptive and very open. I have been meeting with teachers and educators in the Boulder Valley School District, BVSD for short, and I have really gotten to get some great feedback from them. We got to learn about some of the lessons that they already have in history so that we could find a way to incorporate this project's lessons into theirs. But we've also gotten to hear a little bit about what makes them nervous about teaching these topics and just what they would like to get from this. And one of the things that they mentioned was they would like to have the lessons focus on the joy, the resilience of the Black community in Boulder and throughout Colorado. So we've been making sure that that's a part of it, and the students will get to see that. One of the eye-opening things for me as well was also getting to sit down with some students from the Youth Equity Council. They're older, so 8th grade, 7th grade, but also high school students, and to hear them talk about, by their stage of schooling, they've learned a lot about the history of Black people in this country, the struggles that we've been through, and so they would like to see from this project more of the how do Black people or any community that overcomes adversity, how do they overcome that adversity? What types of characteristics are needed? How do you create community to overcome these obstacles? So I've been trying to implement that to the lesson plans as well.
So why do you think Boulder Valley School District has been so enthusiastic in their response to this?
I think just recent history. I also think Boulder leans progressive, which allows for the opportunity to happen. But I mean, you can see through Katrina Miller's film, you can see it's not just a national issue, it's very local, and I think that teachers and students see that and are wanting to learn about that.
Okay, if you could pass the mic to Nyasha. So Nyasha, talk about your work in trying to connect the exhibit to the public, especially what you're thinking about in engaging young people to be excited about this project.
Yes, so we are doing a collaboration with this amazing artist group, and they're called Streetwise. So we're going to be doing murals throughout Colorado, hopefully, that represent and tie into the museum. More information coming with what the murals actually will be. Then also we're doing components of oral histories. So all the oral histories that we have collected, we're doing listen backs for our community so they can come listen to all of the oral history and then have a progressive, open soul conversation about what they just heard, led by a Black figure in the community.
Thank you. All right, Emily, got a question for you. So, as the lead grant writer, can you tell us some maybe lessons learned or interesting challenges in trying to get this together? Well, because I have to say, even when you approached me about it, I was like, there's no way the Museum of Boulder is going to get this grant, so.
I had moments of thinking the same thing. I think there is a tendency to think that in order to be successful, a grant has to have 110% of the details worked out before it launches. And for any of you involved in community-based work, you know that that is detrimental to community-based work. And that if you're going out into a community and announcing exactly what you're doing and exactly how you're going to do it, that you're just going to hit a brick wall. And so building into the structures of the grant room to grow, room to deliberate ways of doing internal work. When you read our description for this session, we were a predominantly white institution. When I say that, I mean almost always we were almost entirely white and had maybe a board member of color, maybe a staff member of color. And so having an outside team work with us on the structural biases and systemic biases and racism was important so that it wouldn't fall too heavily on our project team.
So one lesson learned is brothers like me have to be more hopeful, right? That's one.
Absolutely.
Minister Glenda. So as someone who's collecting oral histories, can you tell us something about that experience, what that's been like?
It has been, thank you, Adrian. It has been one incredible experience. You know, all of us, each of us, has a story. And for Black people in Boulder, there were very few that were captured. Me being at Second Baptist Church for the past 43 years, having known families through 5 generations, was able to get them to tell their stories and what stories they are. Black people have been here, they lived here, they worked here, they raised their families here, and many of them died here. And they're just now getting a chance to capture those stories. You know, there's a saying that says if we neglect the history of our past, we're bound to repeat it. We're capturing the stories of the past, hopefully, so that we will not repeat these in the future. My great nephew says to me, or he says to audiences or other people, you need to tell Aunt Glenda your story because I really think that she was on the Underground Railroad with Harriet Tubman.
So, if you could give us a ballpark idea, how many oral histories do you think you've done so far? Have you collected?
I think about 25.
All right. Of the 25, is there one that really is poignant that just jumps out to you right now?
You know, there is, well, there were 2, so there are people that are in their late 80s that I'm interviewing now, but there are also young people. So the youngest person was Dr. Raylan Rabaka, and he is a professor at CU, just opened after 16 years of working and trying the Center for African and African American Studies on the CU Boulder campus. So I was intrigued by our conversation.
Because so often when we think oral histories, we default to go into seniors, right?
Right.
But young people have something to say too.
We do. I'm just kidding. I am a senior. The theme of our opening was yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I very much represent yesterday.
Hey, Katrina, thank you for this clip of your film. So tell us about, you know, putting this film and how you love for it to augment or amplify what the exhibit is doing, and, you know, why Boulder and Colorado and everyone needs to hear this story. That's a Miller
there's
moth.
one of those Miller moths.
So
yes.
2 Millers and a Miller moth.
All right, you know, this film has done a lot to really open hearts and minds and bring awareness within our community. It is amazing how many people didn't know the history of African Americans in Boulder, and just this taste that was in the film really gave people that understanding of how we might have gotten here. It's really been amazing, Adrian, just to see how many initiatives and conversations, discussions have been happening with people after watching this film. Only in our community, there have been about 40 community screenings, and now that it's reaching PBS nationally, it's probably going to go further. Trying to keep our mics away from each other. So the whole importance of this and why this was important, I'm going to stand up because I can't, I only see half of you. Thank you. Is that Boulder is often, the stories out of Boulder are often told through a white lens, okay? And that's why we don't always hear everybody's stories. And so it was so important to talk about the experience of the people of color, and not only to bring awareness to systemic issues so hopefully can be changed, but also to go to that next step where we want to build relationships and we want to celebrate Black joy, okay? And I feel like this is what we're doing with the museum exhibit of Proclaiming Colorado's Black History,
So you've already seen transformation.
Absolutely, absolutely. You'd be surprised how many different organizations have now started using this film as a prerequisite when they're doing DEI training. We also go to schools with this film in the Boulder Valley School District and St. Vrain. And one thing that's been wonderful in partnering with BVSD is having student panels. So after the film, I will be there with students and they get to talk to teachers directly about their experiences, okay? And this is the type of dialogue that never gets to happen. And I tell you, the learning that happens is just, it's incredible. And just more support for Black initiatives, like I was saying, you know? So, yeah, I'm really excited to move on to this next step after bringing the awareness. How do we build relationships? Let's get to meet more people in our community because there's so many dynamic stories we haven't heard, so.
Any questions from the audience? Yes.
So I have a challenge and a question. Rebecca Hunt. Challenge is, how can you put together a book, a monograph, or something to get it out to the larger museum community that you can do this kind of project, first of all? My challenge is to do that. Second question, when are you going to turn all the oral histories into a book?
All right. Anyone want to take that one?
I am very hopeful that the opening of this exhibit and the completion of this project is the beginning of a broader initiative that I don't really know what that will be. And whether that shapes into working in the museum community to build structures for this, perhaps. But as Katrina's been just sharing, I think that older institutions need this desperately, and we have been finding so much older institutions coming to the museum going, how'd you build relationships? And I want to just say really clearly, allocate budget. Say it with me. Allocate budget. It doesn't have to be through a grant. If you control budgets in any variety, make a line item for community knowledge holders. It is not impossible. Be generous with your meals and lodging and staff schedules so that they can be present in those evening and weekend events and out in the community. But I would love to, and it would be a matter of the interest of this team and or others once the project reaches that point.
And I'm glad you asked that question because that was actually one of the things that planted a seed for this exhibit. So I was at a social gathering with several board members for the Museum of Boulder, and I've written books on Black food history. That's why you have something that says soul food on here. It's a recipe card. That's the cover of my first book on soul food, and on the back is a recipe for a red drink. That's bomb. So I'm sorry, I said red drink. It's red drank. Okay. But I said that eventually I would love to write a book on Colorado's Black history because I knew how rich that story is. So that is definitely a dream. And with the oral histories and all the other things we're collecting, it's going to be easy to write that book. If a publisher will give me enough pages to tell that story. So thank you for asking. Now let's start a question over here. Yes, and then I'll go on to the back. Okay, yes?
Hi,
Oh, could you tell us who you are and what museum you represent?
Hi, Donette Samuels. I actually don't work in the museum. I work at Central Park in New York.
Okay.
And I was actually curious to hear more about the community survey that was conducted in preparation for the exhibition. How was outreach done? Was there any intentional, like targeted decisions around like who's actually taking the survey and what were the goals and how it impacted the final outcome?
So we were in luck because Lorraine Trainer, who helped us with that survey, is here. Do you want to come up and help answer that, or you want to? Yeah, come on up. Come on down.
Yeah, just real briefly, and I'm happy to chat after if that helps. We did a couple different versions. Some targeted, some open to the public. We also used Adrian's social network in terms of trying to reach. So we did a couple online surveys where we just pushed it out to kind of as many different people as we could in as many different communities as we could. That was some of the initial surveys to get our ideas, formulate who should we be talking to, what should we be learning, what questions should we be asking, and then that helped to inform some of those big exhibit buckets. We actually did a lot of work in the museum itself, so people that were coming to the museum, be it visitors, members, school groups. I think we've now had 3 or 4 different in-gallery surveys that people could take, and they're not always surveys. Some are more ranking or voting, choosing, and that also was kind of helping us to narrow down, understanding kind of what the pulse was and what we were looking at. We've also done a bunch of work around some of the exhibit labels, which we're working on right now. So getting feedback on content, stories that we're telling, people that we're highlighting as part of that. And then overarching kind of all of that was trying to come up with our outcomes. What are we trying to achieve? And we're looking at that for the entire project overall. We have a set. We're looking, Aubrey and I have been working on our student and teacher goals and outcomes, and then also looking at the exhibition outcomes as well. So a lot of different methods, a lot of different people that we're talking to, and really trying to be really intentional about reaching out to a pretty broad group of community members.
And it's been really wonderful to have all of this feedback to help us kind of test what language to use. Because, you know, I write content for panels, I'm like, oh, this is gold, right? And they're like, no, this is kind of whack. We're not really understanding the story. So it's helping to get, you know, to a point where we have very accessible content for this exhibit, which is what we want. Yeah.
Also, we did like a statewide convening of different historians, our advisory committee, other people that worked in the museum space. And we just had a nice collaborative brainstorming session that was a full weekend, and that was great. We just asked really deep questions and got everyone's opinions.
Because we want, again, this is an exhibit for all of Colorado's Black history, so we wanted people to feel like they had a stake in it. So that's why it was really important to have that statewide convening. And that was an idea for one of our advisory council members. So, you know, it was valuable input. Okay, in the back, and then we'll come over here.
I'm Al Melton, Eastern Colorado. First, I'm really excited to see this documentary in full. And my question is, just out of curiosity, I would like to know how Afrofuturism plays into the exhibit.
So, do you want, I can answer that. Okay, yeah, so as we go through the flow of the exhibit, Afrofuturism is going to be the last part of that. And so part of it is like how do you define Afrofuturism, and we're thinking about installations and other ways to connect. And we're actually working with some community partners. So we have a Afrofuturistic brewery. Is it in Longmont? Is that technically where it is? Yeah.
Afro Brewery.
Yeah. So we're thinking about programming that connects beyond that. We're asking for their feedback. I think we're planning to have them involved in the opening gala to help advance these themes. We were lucky at the statewide convening to have a faculty member from CU Boulder who is specializing in this subject. So we're not all the way there in terms of the formation, but the idea is that's the departure point when you finish the exhibit, is to talk about those themes. Yeah. Anybody else want to weigh in on that question? Okay. Yes, sir.
I'm Sule Boulder, Go Hall of Fame Museum. 2 questions. Anyone can handle. First, are you planning on making this a traveling exhibit? And if so, who are some of your prospects? Because obviously, you might not travel to New Jersey or something, but so that's it. Like, what are you looking at in Colorado? And how do you get to Boulder? I never been to Colorado.
do you get to Boulder?
Highway 36.
It's about 40 minutes. From your campus? 3 hours. About 3 hours. Yeah. So in terms of the traveling exhibit, right now our discussions, it's not planned. It's our hope that it will travel after the 2-year stint. And we were thinking about traveling around Colorado. So like we have the Fort Garland Museum here, the Garland Museum, there might be a way to have them house some of the exhibit. They're gonna have a Buffalo Soldier exhibit in a couple of months, so maybe we can figure out ways to collaborate there. But we were thinking about having it move around Colorado at first. So that's the plan.
Can I extend that? Yeah, and I think usually when you get a traveling exhibit, you get an exhibit in a box, right? And I think to work in those specific communities to also bring that local perspective into the exhibit. So it wouldn't be an exhibit in the box, I think. It would really feature local families and local heritage.
Yeah, so tailor it to that locality, yes. Yes.
Hi there, Chanel Davis, Harvard Media Center for African American Arts and Culture in Charlotte, North Carolina. Great to see you again.
Yeah.
So you said the show is running for 2 years. That was the first question. My next main question is, what's the targeted outreach plan to ensure that here, starting in Boulder, it really penetrates the market of the American African community? Because while allyship is important, something that we really focus on too at our museum is ensuring that the folks who need to get this information to and this programming to, that they have access to it. So accessibility is extremely important. So what is your targeted outreach plan to ensure that the outreach gets to the folks who need the access to learn about the history, which is really our culture. We don't even know. A lot of us don't even understand
Right.
history.
Yeah. Minister Glenda, you want to talk about how we could reach the African American audience starting out here?
One of the things that we are fortunate to have in Boulder is a church. And so the faith community, the Black church is what I will say. Second Baptist Church is the only Black church between Denver, Colorado, and Cheyenne, Wyoming. And we've been there 114 years, and to your point, many people don't even know about it, but we've been doing outreach, certainly through the museum. We are collaborating on campus. It helps that I'm the historian for the NAACP Boulder County branch, as well as the historian for Second Baptist Church. So we're just tagging on to whoever we know these stories. And trust me, they're Black people. Wherever we're going, Black people have been there. We just have to find them and get them to tell their stories. And so that's one of the things that we're doing in collaboration.
Yeah. Some other things we're thinking about is connecting with Black media. Most of it is based in Denver and Colorado Springs, but we have several media outlets. And then we're thinking of prelude events before the exhibit opens. So on January 21st, we're going to tell the story of Black history through music in the city of Broomfield. June, I said July. Did I say what I said? January? Okay, June, sorry. June 21st. And so we'll tell that story through music. So we're going to have a concert, and we're going to have different genres represented during the course of our. So we will do a play to make sure that Black media is connected there. There's also an African-American host with Colorado Public Radio who is interested in this project. She's going to do interviews and have us on to get out to her following and her audience. So we have to be intentional about this. So yeah. And then I'll pump it out to my social media folks as well. Did anybody else want to? Yeah.
I wanted to add too that as a parent, I'm a part of a few groups in the school system, and I've been able to meet people, parents, Black parents with children, and so I always tell them about the project, just word of mouth, that it's coming up and exchange contact information. So I think within friend groups too, I think that is also a way that we get the word out.
Yeah, and I would say also just all of our partners that we work with, and like Adrian mentioned, going through music or the arts, tagging people in different things that they resonate with, and then drawing them back to the museum.
Katrina, are there any lessons learned from your outreach? Did you have intentional strategies for cultivating African American audience for your film?
Sorry, standing up again.
That's okay.
You know, the film was for anybody to watch, you know, so definitely targeting African American viewers because it really validated a lot of their experiences, but wanted to bring a lot of the awareness of what's going on in our town to white audiences. And so just even in the creation of our film, I think that was something that was really helpful in the final output, is that we gave everybody in the community an opportunity to be involved in the film. We even had something called a feedback screening a few months before we were in completion, where anybody could show up, they got to watch 30 minutes of the film, and let us know their input. You better believe when that film came out, people were interested to see what happened. You know, was my voice in there? So many of the community partners that contributed or otherwise donated, they wanted to come in and see it too, and it just continues to spread and spread. So really, I think the fact that it was such a community-created film really just helped it catapult. So
cool. All right. We had another one here, and then we'll come down again.
My name is Afeni. I'm the Public Programs Manager for Harvey B. Gantt Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. As I'm kind of just listening and I'm always thinking of like experiences that we can bring to our community, it's very interesting to think about like marginalization, dehumanization with Black people, how it differs, how it takes a different manifestation in different regions. And so I would be, I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I work in Charlotte. So my experience of Black history and Blackness is different, right, in these different regions. So I'm wondering, in context of this exhibition, would you be open to like virtual programming where we can connect and discuss like the differences in the history and like cultivation and culture of Black people in like different regions?
That's interesting. You want to care to comment? I love that idea.
Yes, I absolutely love that idea so much. I agree with you. I'm a Boulder, Colorado native, but I went to school in Philadelphia and lived in New York, and I spent a lot of time in LA, and whenever I tell people I'm from Boulder, they're still like, there's Black people in Colorado, and then there's Black people in Boulder. It is different, and our experiences are different, and I was culture shocked going from Colorado to Philadelphia, so I think that would be amazing. And I want to make a sense of community here for Black people to know that they belong, because they've always been here.
Was that culture shock because of cheesesteaks or something else? Oh, do you want to
Yeah, I do. So, great question and great suggestion, great thought. I grew up in what I say, the segregated Jim Crow South in Memphis, Tennessee. I was in the last march with Dr. Martin Luther King on March 28, 1968. Talk about different experiences. And so then I moved to LA, or the LA area, with my husband, because we were with the I've Been Moved company called IBM. And so that's how we got to Boulder. He was transferred to Boulder. And so for the next 43 years, he's since passed away, but for the next 43 years, here I am. So look at the stories. Most people think not most, many people think that Jim Crow was a person. Jim Crow was not a person, he was a system. And I grew up in it, and so when I go into Aubrey schools and St. Vrain Valley, Boulder Valley, and tell them my story, they cannot believe and relate to what my experiences were down south. There were different experiences in Southern California, and certainly different experiences here in Boulder. So yes, to bring the connection together, great thought.
So we will definitely do outreach on that. That's fantastic, so thank you. Yeah.
So Eric Carpio, Fort Garland Museum in History, Colorado. First of all, y'all are doing great work, and I'm glad that you have an audience to share this with nationally. I really appreciated Emily's suggestion around the grant writing and building in flexibility for community input and engagement. And I'm curious in this project how the project has evolved or maybe been enhanced because of that flexibility and through the words. I'm sure lots of ways, but if you can talk about maybe some examples of how that project has changed, maybe from how it was imagined or envisioned when you were writing the grant to what is ultimately going to be the result.
Yeah, absolutely. Bless you to whoever just so the first row of partners on that slide plus the IMLS were the original collaborators on this project. So that is a bit of a visual of the ways that it has grown and expanded. And for the most part, those have been institutions approaching us not as the museum, but us as this Proclaiming Colorado's Black History team, wanting to know how they can support the work and be a part of it. And so it's actually 4 concerts, it's mural festivals, it's collaborating radio stations, and it's actually a little bit nationwide as well. So it has grown organically, and I think it is because of the relationships. You know, this is not just a predominantly Black team. This is this team. Like, look at this amazing group of people. It's unreal. And so you have the full project team in your packets in front of you, and everyone has their own communities and their own outreach and their own areas of expertise. And so I think so much of it has just grown from the little side conversations that we never even knew were happening.
Yeah. Lori?
I think it's important. I love Eric's question.
Lori, will you introduce yourself?
Sure I will. I'm Lori Preston. I'm the executive director of the Museum of Boulder. I'll tell you one of the most powerful things that changed is what was written as the name for this grant was Reclaiming Colorado's Black History.
Reclaiming a vanishing history.
Right, exactly. Reclaiming a vanishing history. So talk about what happened in that room, really in our first meeting, because I think that was the first and most immediate change from what was written to what really needed to be said.
Oh, go ahead and share it. You're up already. Go ahead and share it.
Well, it just, the conversation in the room was, what? Reclaiming? And what do you mean reclaiming? Right now, this is all about, we're not reclaiming, we haven't lost it. We need to proclaim it. And I cannot tell you, it makes me emotional just to think about that time in the room. It was the change and a shift. So immediately we were like, well, are we gonna be able to write the Institute of Museum and Library Services and tell them that we're changing the whole name? And the answer is, yes, we are. And it's not my voice that needs to say it, except to just say, we're on the right track because we changed that name. So.
I want to make sure I'm not ignoring this part of the room. Yes?
Hi, I'm Ted Bickham from Museum of Contemporary Art, Denver. I was just kind of curious from the idea of the exhibition to its opening, but mostly as far as like the collecting of the community surveys and what was your timeline on that, in doing that? And then I feel like you've kind of touched on this in regards to extending out the exhibition and program to other parts of Colorado, but really, there will be more ideas around that, particularly around film, to create for some discourse just around that, here in Colorado, in Denver and Colorado Springs. I think Colorado Springs, because that's really where I'm from, and like my grandma needs to see this, so it's something happening here involved.
Yeah, thank you. Lorraine, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, actually, this is a great segue, so thank you. To the evaluations plan for this grant is also completely enormous. Because we
talking to ideas that were coming to us along different parts of the way. We had, oh, we should do this, oh, we need to talk to this person here. And so we've actually been evaluating the entire time, but we've changed the questions, we've changed who we've talked to, or when new groups come on, bringing them into it. And so there is no timeline. I can't even tell you, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at like date stamps on some of our projects and surveys, to the point that we actually went back to previous community collaborations that the Museum of Boulder did, and did some kind of back evaluation to them to understand how those community projects work together. Could we use any of those ideas for moving forward? So it really was, it was forward, it was backwards, it was continuously moving. To the point that Adrian wants more information about the exhibit labels that I promise I will get him, but we're still actually working through that process even right now.
I have a slide of, why can I not see my cursor? There we go. So this was the broad timeline overview. These slides are available to download online after the conference. But so the full first year of the project was spent listening, at least from the perspective of the museum and what our role and job was. And I think that I felt a fair amount of frustration from a variety of perspectives on what am I supposed to be doing? Are we moving fast enough? And that came from the Black community as well as from museum leadership. But in the end, it really was worthwhile because all our successes have been built on trust. And there, at least I've been told, there have been a lot of starts and stops in this type of work over the decades, and a lot of empty promises, or probably not empty, you know, well-intentioned promises that never came to fruition. And so I think there was a lot of distrust in what we, natural distrust to just enter with the promise of something coming to fruition.
Think about the black and red one.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Zach Mosley, exhibit designer at Studio Tectonic in Boulder. So thank you for making this history about Boulder public. It's amazing, and it's a difficult one, and it really needs to be out there for the whole country, really. My question is there any part of your experiences in this process that you think can telegraph to the work that we all do as museum professionals to integrate this thinking and all the work that we do across the country? There's so much national interest in your project, and how can we take that to all of our projects, institutions,
Zach is one of my very close friends, so we should have many happy hours and brainstorm about this, because I am curious how it would apply to your work, you know, as a contract design build firm that comes into an institution and asks the institution, you know, you are working in community with that room, right? So it is a lot of your practice already to do listening from a starting point of not knowing what the story is, not knowing what the goals and intentions are. But if that institution were to ask you to be prioritizing perspectives outside the wall, I'm not sure. I mean, that was sort of what I tasked you with, right, Aubrey? Was like, what I want doesn't matter. What the students and teachers and school district want is what you should be listening to.
I was just thinking about the question because it's a good one. I would say it kind of just goes back to building relationships. How do you build relationships with folks in your community? That's kind of at the root of it all, is reaching out to your community and bringing people in and building the relationships with trust. Like you were mentioning, your timeline, how it took a good year because people need to be able to trust.
Yes. We'll take two more questions. I think that's all. So we'll go back here and then here. It'll be the last question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Cassie. I work in the
museum professional, really as the one who's most coming from the museum field on this panel, one of the big learning processes in this journey for me has been how even the discussion of needing to diversify our collections is still coming from an extractive place. And I'm really interested in how museums can create databases of community assets so that when we have all moved on from our own institutions, but want to make sure that this exhibit acknowledges the Latino history in mining in Colorado, that there's a way to know which families were in the minefields at the time and what objects are out in the community, because I have not found a strong desire to part with things. And so we have digitized some things and are still working on that, but the intellectual property is not easily parted with either.
And another thing we're going to do is we're going to amplify what other institutions around Colorado have in terms of Black histories. For instance, History Colorado is creating a mobile phone app which will highlight Black history markers and things in Colorado. So we want to let people know that. And so we will have the exhibit linked to other people either in the scan a code or online, because this will have an online component. So we want to direct people to where other assets are. All right, you have the last question.
Thank you so much. My name is Jocelyn, and I'm the Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. I'm curious to know more about your process. This just seems like such a beautiful outcome of a project with so many tendrils and so many stakeholders and so many perspectives. You all seem like such an affirming group, but I can imagine working in a different community. I'm sort of curious as to what you share, what is your structure of meeting with each other, how you make decisions.
So the question is like, what was your process like? How did you resolve conflicts, differences? How did you reach consensus, that kind of thing? So I think the guiding principle is like, don't listen to Adrian. I think that was the first one. But go ahead, why don't you all talk about the process? Or any thoughts or any reflections?
Shall we just tell AAM that we're keeping this room for the next hour? I highly recommend downloading these slides. I decided not to go through them, but I did prepare them, and they have the actual fundamental structure of the grant that INLS approved. And for those of you, I think I have a sense of some of the barriers that you all face in implementing community-based work at your institutions, and I think no one who came to this session needs to be told what the value is of community-based work, but are probably up against those same barriers. It's been a journey. It did take building this relationship and the trust and your stature, Adrian, helped give people faith in us, and that was a good starting point. And Katrina and us have been working together for 15 years, which was a big moment for me. And so we had like a really grounded relationship, and most of the videos in our exhibits are her work and have been for a long time. And the process just, is very iterative, and there were people that knocked on our door and said, we really want to be a part of this.
We were concerned, Emily, share how we were concerned about Boulder Valley School District, because that one took a little while.
Oh, well, so I think we finished this grant in December of 2020, which might be a period in time you recall. And so I'm quite pleased that we only officially had one person who had said yes, had confirmed that they wanted to be a part of the project, and then when we actually were granted, went, and that was a BBSD representative, a Boulder Valley School District representative. And who can blame them? Not, in addition to a pandemic, they have also been through 2 restructures and brand new curriculum since that time. And
now they're.
And so, yeah, we just changed the way our relationship was with them. And so Aubrey's work was directly with a big team of BBSD. So they were partners, but not on our advisory council anymore.
And I just to close that point on, close that point off, I would say having the community involvement and input really helped resolve a lot of conflicts. Because we say, this is what our community wants. So that helped quite a bit. And then it's ongoing diplomacy. I will say that for sure. So please give some love to our panelists. Thank you so much for being here. And just always remember, Black history is our history.